yes, back and better than ever. Presented by Progressive Insurance, guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line, and just excited to be here. Just thrilled to be with you. It's cold outside, a little crisp in the air. Got home, had a quick sandwich, raced down here to the basement, and I am ready to go. I have an update for you from Adam Schefter on the injury to Nick Foles from last night. I'll give you that in a second. We get you the insight on all the basketball wheeling and dealing that's coming fast and furious. Will James Harden be traded? Will Giannis Antetokounmpo get what he needs to stay in Milwaukee? We got NBA stuff going on. You know, the interesting thing, look, life in a pandemic in every way is awful. And the pandemic obviously is terrible and people are dying and it's just awful. But from the impact that it's had on sports, one of the things that it has done is that by putting things at times of the year that you're just not accustomed to, I don't know, for some people maybe it has seemed incongruous and less interesting. For me, it's been more interesting. Like having the Masters in the middle of November, I loved it. Like I'm cold and then the Masters is going on. I loved it. And just today, someone was like, well, we got to do something on NBA free agency and the draft is tomorrow. And I said, oh yeah, we have to do something on NBA free agency and the draft is tomorrow. So everything being in a different place than you're usually accustomed to finding it, it's interesting because I'm the kind of person who usually, if anything is not in the place where I'm accustomed to finding it, it really bothers me. I am the sort who I've got my glasses sitting here and my phone sitting here and I've got my clock on this side of the computer. And if everything got reversed when I came down here tomorrow against my will, I'd be unable to do the show. But I'm digressing even before I begin. One way or another, I'm thrilled to be here, and that was a long way of just saying that. Here's the update that I have from Shefty, and it is good news from Chicago because as unimaginably terrible as their offense is, you never want to see anyone be seriously hurt. And the news on Nick Foles seems to be good. This is from Shefty now 10 minutes ago. Bears head coach Matt Nagy said Nick Foles' hip and glute injury, quote, isn't as bad as we once thought. The Bears are on a bye and Foles will be day-to-day. Look, that's obviously first and foremost very good news. You don't want to see him be seriously hurt. I know Nick. He's a great guy. Everybody who knows him loves him. So that's one of the complicated things about this job is that you have to separate the personal feelings from the professional criticism. The personal feelings are, I think he's a very good man. Everyone seems to love him. Everyone who knows him far better than I know him loves him. And he's had a very nice career that has included one unforgettable run, something for which he will be a legend for the rest of his life. He will be a legend in Philadelphia and really throughout the NFL for that Super Bowl run and for outdueling Tom Brady of all people in the biggest game of the year. So he will forever have that. So there's that side of it. And then there's the other side of it, which is he's just not an NFL starting quarterback. That's just the reality of the situation. And watching the Chicago Bears, the only thought I had watching that game last night was, I need to look at the schedule and just hope against hope that they don't have another national game because they cannot subject us to watching this offense last night. If you didn't see the game last night between the Bears and Vikings, let me tell you what you missed. The Bears got a kickoff return for a touchdown. They got an interception that set them up in chip shot field goal territory. Outside of that, they added 3 points. They had a 104-yard kickoff return. They had 149 yards of total offense. Their offense is so bad that I don't even really have words to describe it. I can only give you numbers. And that is this. Any of you who listen to me know just how disgraceful the New York Jets are and have been. Well, this season, Hembo sent me a list. In all of the following offensive categories, points per game, points per drive, yards per game, yards per play, first downs per game, third down percentage, average drive distance, and total offensive efficiency, the Bears are 31st in every one of those categories this year. The Jets are 32nd. Only the Jets are worse than the Bears. How this team was 5-1 at this point seems almost impossible to fathom. They're just unimaginably terrible. I have more numbers for you. The Bears, in their last 4 games, they were 5-1, they're now 5-5. In their last 4 games, they have punted 20 times. They have turned the ball over 7 times. And they have scored 4 offensive touchdowns. That's just not bad. That's inept. And candidly, it's inexcusable. When you hire a coach for the express purpose of having him develop your young quarterback into the player you drafted him to be, And he not only doesn't do that, but switches quarterbacks to a guy who absolutely is not an NFL starting quarterback, and your offense is the second worst in the National Football League, that's the coach's problem. That's a coach problem. And the problem in Chicago is the coach every bit as much as it is anything else. The players aren't great, but the coach is responsible for a lot more than I think he gets the blame for. The whole world made this a Mitch Trubisky problem. And now they're going to make it a Nick Foles problem. Well, there's a thread of commonality between those two problems, and his name is Matt Nagy. I'm Greeny with you here, and I'm going to bring Swagoo into the conversation. Mark is joining me on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Pennzoil synthetic motor oils are made from natural gas, giving you unbeatable engine protection. The proof is in the Pennzoil, based on Sequence 4A wear test using SAE 5W30. And Swagoo, I just want to throw a number at you. You play defense in the National Football League. Hembo sent me this note. We have the Bears, our analytics, as the number one defense in total efficiency under Matt Nagy. In the years that he's been there, number one. They're going to have 0 playoff wins to show for it, and they have the second worst offense in the NFL. So take me inside the dynamics, the chemistry of a team where one side of the ball is as good as the Bears' defense, and the other side is as totally inept as their offense.
It's a 100% divide, G. It's a disconnect. It's a finger-pointing environment. And I don't want to speak on what the Chicago Bears defenders are saying or are doing, but I know inherently you have an issue with what's going on the other side of the ball, because it is directly predicated on how you and your future is looked at and viewed. I think people think a lot of times that you can kind of single out, right, the coaching, or you can single out the players. But a lot of things in the times happens. And like we're talking about Matt Nagy and Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky and the saga with the QB, where now you have a changing of the guard, and then you realize that only a few players and franchises are protected most of the time. And that's your star elite defensive guys. And then if you have a quarterback or if you have a receiver, most of the time that's what it's supposed to be. So it's a lot of that going on right now. It's a lot of uncertainty about the future. It's a lot of uncertainty about the new head coach, if that's going a change that's going to be made. You don't have a quarterback right now that you feel like for the future is going to put you in a situation to win unless something changes in free agency or you somehow get a draft pick or whatever. So a lot of dissension, G. It's a lot of that, man. Like these guys are watching and they are talking about the same things we talking about. They are looking at this offense be inept. They are looking at this offense not produce yards. They are not giving up a lot of points to the opposing team, and they cannot get wins. It's frustrating, man. And when you are putting it on the line, when you playing at an elite level, and you know as a unit that we, in particular, the 11 that's on defense at whatever time that is, are good enough to be Super Bowl contenders, to put ourselves in a position to win games, we're doing as much as we can possibly do to give the other side of the ball opportunities to score points and put them in good situations, and they're not producing. So, yeah, it's divided, man. Like, we would love the team aspect and the atmosphere and to say that, oh, everybody's fine and we're going to encourage each other and we're going to keep – and I'm sure some of that is going on as well. But in the grand scheme of things, when you look at how the different levels of how you're playing and showing up on Sunday as opposed to the other side of the ball, you can't help but think, man, these dudes tripping.
Greeny with you. That's extremely well put. Greeny with you, presented by Progressive Insurance. That's, of course, Marcus Spears with me on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. On the flip side last night, Marcus, not only did the Vikings win their third straight game, but I'm just sort of looking at the situation. I think they're going to make the playoffs. Listen to their next few games. They get Dallas, Carolina, Jacksonville. They still have the Bears again and the Lions again. You look at the way Chicago's falling like a stone. I think the Vikings have a very good chance to make the playoffs. What did you see from them during this 3-game win streak, and do you think they can make a run?
I think they can make a run, and obviously Dalvin Cook has been phenomenal. Last night 30 carries, I think, for 96 yards, which in the grand scheme of things is not going to look eye-popping, but it was enough to keep Chicago's defense honest so Kirk Cousins can get it to Thielen and Justin Jefferson and the play action being in the play. But, the bottom line is this. Like, we saw this Minnesota team beat the New Orleans Saints in the playoffs last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think we forget, man. We have – and that's the whole conversation is going to come back to what it's always been about when they're making this playoff run or even when they get to the playoffs. Can Kirk Cousins do it? Right? The defense is not as good as they were last year in that run. Obviously, Danielle Hunter is not there, and, they have different pieces. But you saw last night that this offense can be elite if they are able to continue to run the football with Dalvin Cook. And even when that's taken away to a certain extent, you still have Thielen and Rudolph and Justin Jefferson, who is emerging as one of the better wide receivers in the game, especially as a rookie. So it's highly logical. It's highly reasonable that the Minnesota Vikings get into the playoffs. And I know we say this and it's cliche, and I know the Chiefs at times make us forget about this. But all you need is a good 3 hours on each playoff game, right? So that's why people are so crazy about getting in. Like, I've heard all of this talk. And don't get me wrong, I'm in the same vein with everybody else about the NFC East. But the landscape changes in the playoffs, man. You are a interception return for a touchdown away. You are a kick return away. So when you bring up Minnesota getting into the playoffs, that could be very scary for people based on the personnel that they have offensively. And as long as Kirk Cousins can continue to lean on Dalvin Cook, and he's in a position where he can make those plays to those weapons that he has on the outside, it's going to be a very scary team when the playoffs come. Our guy, RD, has been on NFL Live for weeks picking the Minnesota Vikings to win games. And they've let him down. And then now that they on this win streak, I'm starting to see the things that he thought was going to come to fruition earlier in this season. It may just be coming late. And look, I played for Mike Zimmer. He was the defensive coordinator when I first got to the Dallas Cowboys, when I first was drafted there. Mike Zimmer is a hell of a coach, bro. So when you get him into that situation, or if they have a shot at getting into the playoffs, Minnesota has as much talent offensively as anybody else we've been talking about in the NFC.
I agree. I was just sent a note here. This is very interesting. You're listening to Greeny on ESPN Radio, and as we're talking, you may have heard that little ding because I forgot to silence my phone, but I'm glad that I did because I look up and I see a note here from Staloff that says Theo Epstein is stepping down. So I guess this is significant breaking news. Theo Epstein, who is going to be a Hall of Fame baseball executive, who led the Boston Red Sox, a team that hadn't won a World Series in 86 years, to a championship a generation ago, and then did the same in Chicago, a team that had waited even longer than that. He came to Chicago and built a champion with the Cubs. I'm just getting this note. Theo Epstein is stepping down. I will get you more information on that as quickly as possible. Someone get my buddy Jesse Rogers on the phone stat as we will get you the information. Quickly, one more thing, Marcus, while I have you. I thought of you when I saw this story yesterday, and someone told me that you had posted some thoughts about it. James Harden is apparently turned down a contract extension that would have made him the first ever player to get paid $50 million in a season. And I just wonder, Swagoo, how would they have gone over at home with you if you had come home and said to your beautiful wife, you know what, they offered me $50 million and I turned it down?
I'm literally having anxiety right now. I thought about that, and I was just, listen, man, I ain't ever been in that tax bracket to even have the ability to think about if I was going to turn down $50 million. Not even think about it. Like, I don't even know how you get to the point of thinking about saying no to $50 million that James Harden could potentially get from Houston. It's not like that franchise hadn't tried to do everything possible to get him there. They hired Silas Jr. to come in as a new head coach. If somebody offers you $50 million, $50 million, and they want to build not only the money, they also want to build around you and try to help you win a championship. And listen, I said it too in my tweet. James Harden has the right to do what James Harden wants to do. I liken it to when we saw Dave Chappelle walk away from the Chappelle show when he turned down all the money. You just pray that he lands on his feet like Dave Chappelle has. Because if James Harden wants out of Houston, and I've been seeing the reports that he wants to end up in Brooklyn with KD and Kyrie, I don't know how many basketballs they're going to start playing with in the NBA, for one. And the second thing is, you are not guaranteed to win a championship hooking up with them. So if you don't win a championship, you can still make a lot of money. If you don't win a championship, you left Houston and turned down $50 million in the possibility of them surrounding you and changing up what y'all do from a basketball standpoint to get to a championship. That's hard. That is horrible for me to think about, G.
I'm with you.
Hard. When I never want to be anybody but myself, G. But when I saw that report, I wanted to be James Harden to know what it feels like to turn down $50 million.
I'd like to know it myself. Hey, very quickly, I don't know if you heard it, but when Jalen was on today on Get Up during one of the, we do mostly football today, and Swagoo, of course, was with us. But I asked Jalen. Jalen said he doesn't see any way in the world they make that deal if Kyrie Irving isn't in it going the other way. So could you imagine if the Nets wind up trading Kyrie Irving before he and KD ever play a game together?
It would be catastrophic, because all of the talk about what the Nets did in the offseason, acquiring Steve Nash as the head coach, was a decision that was basically made by Kyrie and KD. So we get to a point now where we hear, like, James Harden obviously changes the landscape, G, when you hear that he wants to get out of Houston. That changes everything about a lot of teams' plans and what they had planned on doing, right? Because he's that type of player. As much as we can criticize James Harden is elite at playing the game of basketball. But if that was to happen and Kyrie was shipped off, I would be sitting. I wouldn't even want to be on Get Up. I would want to hear you and Jalen and Woj and Jay Will and whoever else talks basketball tell me what the hell Kyrie Irving is going to say and do if that ever transpired, man. Now, all intents and purposes, you would hope that James Harden would end up there without them having to send Kyrie, but I'm with Jalen. I don't know if there is any other value outside of Kyrie and obviously KD, who they are not going to put in any trade package, that is valuable enough for you to acquire James Harden without you sending a marquee player.
We need to set aside time every week just to have Marcus talk hoops, because nobody knows more about it and loves it more than you do. Big fella, thank you. We'll see you at 4 o'clock today on ESPN for NFL Live.
All right, G. Take care, brother. Appreciate you.
You got it. Marcus Spears with me here, and I invite you to be a part of Greeny Nation on the Dr. Pepper call-in line. We'll do the calls a little later. ESPN Nation is presented by Dr. Pepper. The college football season is heating up, and so is your favorite Dr. Pepper-loving college football town, Fansville. Head to a store near you to treat your inner college football fan to an ice-cold 20-ounce Dr. Pepper today. Again, more on this big story that is developing literally as we speak. The Chicago Cubs just tweeted Theo Epstein will step down from his role as president of baseball operations effective November 20th and depart the organization after 9 seasons. Jed Hoyer, who has been there as long as Theo has and has been the general manager, will now become the president of baseball ops. I'm reading this now from Jeff Passan in a letter sent to his friends. Theo said, next summer will be my first in 30 years not clocking into work every day at a major league ballpark. So that would be in response to the idea that maybe he winds up with the Mets, who now have very deep pockets in the person of Steve Cohen, or the Phillies or some other place. But again, the story here, Theo Epstein, who is really an iconic figure, who won the 2 biggest championships that the sport has seen in the last half century. I mean, what championships have been bigger in Major League Baseball than the Red Sox when they finally did it, the first one in 2004, ending that 86-year stretch, and then building the Cubs into a champion for the first time they had done it since 1908. So that's Theo Epstein, who is on his way to the Hall of Fame. I have no doubt that he will wind up being the GM somewhere else again at some point. He's saying it won't be next year. We will get more information on this as we go. We're just getting started. We haven't even gotten to the Harden trade yet, but there's plenty there. And when a coach has to say, we are not embarrassed, you know everything has gone completely wrong. Well, you'll hear a coach say exactly that coming up, and you will decide exactly what it should mean. We'll do all those and more as we continue, but right now a word from DraftKings. You know, there's no better place to get in on all the football action than with DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. And to add to this week's excitement, DraftKings has a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes up for grabs. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now. Use my name, Greeny, as the code. For a limited time, new users can get a free shot at millions of dollars in prizes this week. That's code Greeny to get a free shot at millions of dollars in prizes with your first deposit. Only at DraftKings. Make it rain. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. We are also brought to you by ZipRecruiter. You know that businesses have had to be flexible this year, from working remotely to pivoting their business models for long-term survival, like restaurants moving their dining outdoors, doing more takeout. Well, if you're in charge of hiring for your business, these pivots have made your job even more challenging too. Thankfully, there's one place you can count on to make hiring easier, and that's ZipRecruiter.com/Greeny. It's no wonder that 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And right now, lots of fun we're having here at half past the hour. I told you when I came back to radio in this time slot that one of the things I was really looking forward to was following a bunch of breaking news. I've been doing mornings for 21 years, and as a general rule, players don't get traded and they don't get fired and all sorts of these kinds of things don't happen in the hours that I was doing Mike and Mike or the hours that I do get up. But we've got a lot of stuff going on here, and it's fun and exciting. Theo Epstein stepping down. I was just reading more into his quotes. He says he does anticipate having a third act in his general managing career, but he doesn't expect it to be this year. So at least his public stance is that he expects to take this season off and then find another job, perhaps running a franchise the year after that. He will be extremely highly sought after. We'll bring Jeff Passan into the conversation in an hour to speculate about that. The other breaking news that I'm seeing, this doesn't quite qualify as breaking news, but Ed Werder just tweeted that Drew Brees is going to get a second opinion on his ribs, which are broken on both sides, and he has a collapsed or punctured lung. And that will be to determine whether or not he needs to go on IR. If he goes on IR, he has to be out a minimum of 3 weeks. Most of the people I've talked to said they think that it will be an extremely quick recovery if he's back at all this regular season. So that's 6 weeks. So we'll wait and see what happens with Brees, but according to Ed Werder, he's getting a second opinion. Meanwhile, let's get back to the business that we have at hand. Greeny presented by Progressive Insurance. At Progressive, they're making things even easier. They'll help you bundle your home and car insurance together so you can save on both. Learn more at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. You're hearing a lot about wheeling and dealing in the NBA, and the biggest name, of course, is James Harden, who wants to go to Brooklyn. But I had Jalen Rose on Get Up this morning, and he said he doesn't see Harden going there, at least not with the 2 superstars who are already there. This was Jalen earlier today.
I know that we're talking about Harden either wanting to go team up with D'Antoni with the Nets or with Daryl Morey again with the Sixers. But in a vacuum, I don't love it. Let me repeat that. In a vacuum, I don't love it. Now, if you're the Houston Rockets, you bet not be doing a deal for James Harden that don't include Kyrie Irving. So I don't see those 3 actually playing together. But if it does happen, here's what we're going to see. One guy with the ball and the other 2 guys watching.
That's extremely well put by my friend Jalen, as only he can. Look, when James Harden has the ball, everybody's watching. When Kyrie Irving has the ball, everybody's watching. I think Durant, who comes from the opposite of that, or at least most recently comes from the opposite of that, where he won a couple rings in Golden State where they move the ball as well as any team in the NBA has in years, I think that's what he would like. Now, here's what would work about it. Obviously, there's a long history between Harden and KD. You don't need me to tell you they came up together in OKC, and they were young superstars together when that team went to the finals and lost to LeBron 8 years ago. Harden was coming off the bench, and KD and Westbrook were the superstars in Oklahoma City. So those guys obviously know each other and they know each other's game. And if they want to be together, they want to be together. And the question is, where does Kyrie fit into that? Because you can have those two guys and put pieces around them. And Kyrie Irving, look, if you're asking me right now, if I'm a team, let's just use the Nets, or if I'm KD, forget the team. If I'm KD, would I rather play with James Harden or Kyrie Irving? Honestly, I'd rather play with Harden. I know that Harden has the reputation of folding in the postseason that he has, and Kyrie has the opposite. But if I'm KD, I'm not worried about that, because I'll say, just give me the ball. Neither one of those two guys. Kyrie had an ability to come up big in the playoffs because LeBron was alongside him. James Harden has been the primary scoring option all this time. The pressure will not be on him in Brooklyn if he's got KD. So to me, if I'm KD and you gave me the option right now, I could either have James Harden or Kyrie on this team. I would go with Harden. I'd be interested to see if that's what winds up happening. So that's the basketball story, and we will go a little deeper into that with Zach Lowe a little later. The draft is tomorrow. There's all this basketball stuff going on in the middle of November that we're not accustomed to, and it's fun, so we'll see where it gets. Look, we all accidentally damage our phones, right? That happens. Now Straight Talk Wireless's new Platinum Unlimited plan includes phone protection, just $65 a month for unlimited talk, text, data, and more. See Mobile Protect terms and conditions at Asurion.com/straight talk. Limitations and exclusions apply. All right, I told you a few minutes ago that if a coach ever has to say the words, "I'm not embarrassed," you know things have gone really bad. Well, Jim Harbaugh had to say those words when he was asked about his team's most recent performance. Here was Jim, the head coach of Michigan, a 97.1 the ticket yesterday.
How do we handle it is we get back to work. We're not going to slow down. We're never going to stop. And we're going to, keep, not going to feel sorry for ourselves. I don't think there's anything to be embarrassed about. You just keep pushing forward. And yeah, there's some, people think athletic greatness is defined by perfection. It's not. It's defined by overcoming obstacles and overcoming adversity. So, as you asked me when we first got on the phone here, how was I doing? I'm attacking, and same thing I want our players doing.
So that's the right thing for Jim Harbaugh to say, and of course he's not going to say he's embarrassed. And knowing Jim as I do, I don't believe he is embarrassed. But the reality is this is a problem. What's going on in Michigan right now is just well below expectations, and I have been the one who has been actively defending him on TV and radio, saying part of the problem that Jim has had in his years in Ann Arbor are unrealistic expectations. If the expectation is win national championships routinely, then you've come to the wrong place, because that's not what they do at Michigan. The last outright national championship they won was in 1948. They've shared one national championship since then. Bo Schembechler won 0 national titles. So if that's the expectation, be in the playoff every single year like Ohio State and Alabama are, that's not realistic. But that's a far cry, that expectation, from expecting to be in the game with Wisconsin in your own building in the second quarter. 28-0 in the second quarter at home against Wisconsin is not an unrealistic expectation. That's not asking too much, not from Michigan or from literally anyone. So this has gone so far from where it was. This season has just been terrible. There's no other way to put it. It's been a terrible season in Ann Arbor. And it comes at a bad time for a variety of reasons. One of them is Harbaugh's contract is up after next season. So they either have to extend it or they have to part ways. You cannot have a lame duck head coach in college. He won't be able to recruit anybody. And that's the lifeblood of the team, of the sport. So it'll be interesting to see what they wind up doing. I got a little behind on what I was planning to do, so I'm going to break briefly on that thought. But coming up next, I will tell you where I think he could go. There is a place that Jim Harbaugh, going home for him was Ann Arbor. I've got another place that he could wind up that might also be considered going home. We'll get to that in a moment. We've got a very busy day working here. I'm glad you're with me on ESPN Radio. And right now, a word from DraftKings. There's no better place to get in on all the football action than with DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. And to add to this week's excitement, DraftKings has a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes up for grabs. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now. Use the code Greeny for a limited time. New users can get a free shot at millions of dollars in prizes this week. That's the code Greeny to get a free shot at millions of dollars in prizes with your first deposit. Only at DraftKings. Make it rain. Minimum $5 deposit required. That's called #Greeny. You can get it anywhere that you get your podcasts. I will also tell you that if it's Tuesday, it means a new episode of my podcast, my interview podcast, which is called I'm Interested. And my guest today, Christopher Mad Dog Russo. For those of you who are fans of Chris Russo's, it is a very lively, as you would imagine, 40-minute conversation about his career and about sports. And so, again, it is called I'm Interested, and you can find it anywhere that you normally get your podcasts. All right, I just played for you a soundbite from Jim Harbaugh, in which he said, I'm not embarrassed, and we're going to push forward, and athletic greatness is not about perfection, it's about overcoming obstacles. All the things that you say when your team is struggling as badly as his is. But I'm going to tell you right now that if this indeed is the last year for Jim Harbaugh in Ann Arbor, and it is starting to appear increasingly likely that that's the case, I have an idea of someplace he could go next. That would also be a homecoming. To set it up, I want you to hear John U. Bacon, who was on the Paul Feinbaum show yesterday, talking about what the NFL's level of interest is in Harbaugh despite his struggles. Listen to this.
Chicago Bears would be potential candidates. The New York Jets, of course, that's another candidate there. They would probably pin their hopes on Jim's 4 years at San Francisco, where he took over a moribund program, got him to the conference final 3 times, despite what happened in Michigan. So I would never doubt the NFL would put in a bid for Jim. You can question the logic of it, but that's probably how they're thinking, and I already know from better sources than yours truly that some have already expressed interest.
So he stole a little bit of my fire there by pointing out the team I was going to mention. But of course, for Jim Harbaugh, Chicago would be a homecoming. Jim Harbaugh was drafted in the first round by the Chicago Bears and played quarterback there for years, played under Mike Ditka, played well, wasn't a great player, was a little bit at the time of a controversial player because there were ups and downs. But one of the things that I remember most vividly about Harbaugh as a Bear was how close he was to the McCaskey family. In fact, one of the things that people sometimes made a big deal of was that Mike McCaskey, who at that time, he's no longer with us, but Michael McCaskey, who was sort of the acting governor of the McCaskey family, for those of you across the country, George Halas's daughter, Virginia, married a man named Ed McCaskey, and the McCaskey family has now owned the Bears and operated the Bears for generations. And Michael McCaskey, who was the acting owner when Harbaugh was the player there, they used to make fun of how close the two of them were. They used to say that they would work out together, all kinds of things. So I'm not telling that story to make anyone feel or look bad. I'm telling it to point out how close the McCaskeys were to Harbaugh. So if the Bears, whose team I think is hopelessly finished, and who I think have their coach primarily to blame, decide to make a coaching change, and Michigan and Jim Harbaugh decide to shake hands and say, you know what, against all odds, this just didn't work out. Let's part friends. Do I think that a Harbaugh landing spot in Chicago would make sense? I do. I think that's not impossible. And I'd like to hear what the Tom Waddles and others in Chicago think of that. My buddies Waddle and Sylvie and the rest of the crew from ESPN 1000 in Chicago, I'd be interested to hear what they think of that idea. Jim Harbaugh possibly coming back to Chicago as the coach of the Bears. I would definitely consider that a possibility. One other thing I want you to hear before we finish up an hour. This was my favorite soundbite of the day. We'll make this Straight Talk brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. A story that got so little attention when it happened that I didn't even know about it until yesterday is that when the Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, beat the Chiefs in Kansas City, whenever that was, 4 weeks ago, the only loss Kansas City has had this season, that apparently when the Raiders got back on their buses to go to the airport, they circled Arrowhead Stadium. They did a victory lap around Arrowhead Stadium. And Andy Reid, just the reason I now know this is that Andy Reid commented on it yesterday saying, well, that's not the way we do things around here, but they won, they can do whatever they want. Very passive aggressive. So the straight talk will come from the opposing coach, John Gruden, who explained why it happened and how it happened as only he can. Here's John.
You can find a smart aleck bus driver in Kansas City who made some snide comments when we got on the bus. Maybe that's why we drove around the stadium, just to tick him off. You know, this is ridiculous. Next question.
John Gruden, Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise. Let me tell you something. Sneaky great rivalry, sneaky great. John Gruden, Andy Reid. These are conversations I've had with Gruden and with Brett Favre. That Gruden and Reed were young offensive coaches, young, up-and-coming, brilliant offensive-minded coaches on Mike Holmgren's staff in Green Bay. And great quarterbacks, they make head coaches out of a lot of people. The best thing you can be is attached to a great quarterback. Look at Adam Gase. He's been a head coach all this time. He's got 2 head coaching jobs out of coaching Peyton Manning. You think Peyton Manning needs a coach? I could coach Peyton Manning and wind up getting a head coaching job someplace. Adam Gase got a coaching job with the Dolphins and then with the Jets. But anyway, the point of it is that those guys were on the staff with Favre when Favre was becoming the superstar quarterback. And Gruden has told me, and Favre confirmed it, of how incredibly competitive Gruden and Reed were with each other at that time. That basically they would each draw up all these plays, and they were very competitive over which ones Mike Holmgren put into the game. Holmgren, who himself had been a great offensive coordinator under Bill Walsh. Holmgren would choose plays. I like that one, I like that one, I like that one, and they would fight. The two of them, Reed and Gruden, Andy Reid and John Gruden, going all the way back to then, were very competitive with each other about which guys' plays got more of in the game. And I guess Favre had a role in that. And Favre confirmed that when I had him on here a few weeks ago. So do not think that those things just go away. I think they're friendly with each other. I don't mean to say that they hate each other. But there's a rivalry with those two guys that goes back at this point 25 years. So Sunday night when those two teams meet again, this could be very interesting, especially after the Las Vegas Raiders victory lap around Arrowhead last time they played. And I'll say this too about the Raiders. If they should win this game on Sunday night, we will all have to start paying attention. My old buddy Mark is and where he may wind up. We'll get to the basketball in a few minutes here with Zach Lowe because there's a lot of wheeling and dealing going on. But first things first, we're going to talk a little football. And I have been looking forward to this a lot. So I will tell you that in my lifetime, and all the years that I've been on the radio, obviously, the person I have spent the most time talking to on the radio was Mike Golick. The number 2 person, the person I spent the second most time talking to in my lifetime on the radio, I haven't talked to since we've started doing this again in August. He is now a terrific analyst doing games for Fox Sports, and he's one of my favorite people in the world. Mark Schlereth is with me on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Hello, Popo. How are you?
You know what? I'm doing great. I got granddaughter or grandkid number 3 coming along. I don't know if it's going to be my granddaughter or grandson, but number 3 is coming along here at the end of December. So I'm really excited about this. And obviously, Popo, the nickname that was given to me I think I gave that to myself on Mike and Mike all those years ago.
You did. Yes, you did. That's correct. Well, I did not know that. Is this Daniel's third?
Daniel's third,
yep. Expecting?
That is who's expecting.
Very good. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's very wonderful for you and Lisa and everybody. Congratulations. It's great to see you, my man. And I so enjoy when Red Zone cuts to your games. I sit there every single week. I say, States, that stink talking right now. And you've had some very good games in recent weeks. And this week you had the Saints game in which Drew Brees gets hurt. And so I'll start there. And then I want to talk about last night's Bears. And then you have the Eagles coming up this week. So it's the trifecta of interesting teams to talk about. Let's start with the Saints. Brees goes down. In comes Jameis. I think we can assume reasonably safely that with these broken ribs, Brees is going to miss a reasonably significant period of time. What do you expect them to do at quarterback, and how do you expect it to go?
Well, I expect them to start Jameis Winston, and I think you're going to look at Taysom Hill get a little expanded role, and the guy's an incredibly dynamic football player. He's one of the most unique guys. You remember years ago when Buster Posey was playing for Florida State, and he had a game where he went into all 9 positions? That's Taysom Hill. He can do that. I mean, he can play your X receiver, your Z receiver, your F receiver. He can play tight end. He can play fullback. He can play tailback, all those things, and obviously quarterback. So you're going to see a mixture of him along with Jameis Winston. But remember last year, Drew Brees missed 5 games. Teddy Bridgewater came back and kind of resurrected his career. That's what you're looking for with Jameis Winston. We know he has a propensity to throw it into a team meeting. That's not going to fly with Sean Payton. He's going to have to take that underneath stuff, the check down stuff that they really like. Kind of matriculate the ball down the football field. So that's going to be part of what Jameis Winston's going to have to do. And I'm telling you what, I think that he'll thrive in that kind of environment under Sean Payton. So we'll see if he can resurrect his career, much like Teddy Bridgewater was able to do for him last year.
Yeah, they went unbeaten with Bridgewater, and he parlayed that into a starting job, and he's playing very well. The thing is that there are no two people more different in the way they play the position, at least the way they have, than Jameis and Teddy. Teddy Bridgewater was somewhat similar to Drew Brees, really, and Jameis couldn't be more the opposite. So talk me through how, if you're the coaching staff, you didn't really have an off season with him. He's only in his first year with the program. You turn Jameis Winston into the kind of quarterback that we have seen in New Orleans for the last 15 years.
Yeah, well, I think the number one thing that you have to look at is how talented this football team is. I'm going to make a compelling argument. The Saints are the most talented team in all the National Football League. When you look at, Armstead at left tackle, Ramczyk at right tackle, you look at what they have along their front, they're as good as anybody in football. I'll make a compelling argument that Kamara is the best back in all of football. Mike Thomas on one side, Emmanuel Sanders, the different rotation that they have of players. And one thing that I think Sean Payton probably doesn't get credit for is Sean Payton wants to control line of scrimmage. He wants to run the football. They really control the tempo of the game. They control the clock. They control and manage the game through a short passing game. And after they lull you into the short passing game, that's when they just pound you. They pound you in the running game. So they've got the ability to essentially say, this is the way we call a game, and here's where you're going to fit. It's not about pushing the ball down the football field deep, pushing the ball down the seams. And Jameis Winston's going to have to adhere to that. Now, he's been there long enough to understand how Drew Brees does it. We'll see if he can actually implement that into his game. But I don't know why you wouldn't if you're Jameis Winston. Take those checkdowns, take those short throws, and use that running game, use your running backs the way that Drew Brees does. I mean, that's a recipe for success. It's been proven.
Absolutely. And look, he's got the talent that made him the number one pick in the draft not all that long ago. So resurrect is the right word. He has a chance to resurrect his career. Let's see if he can do it. For the Saints, who have winnable games coming up on their schedule, they'll do it without Drew Brees. Greeny and Mark Schlereth, who's with me here. Let's talk about the team we watched lose last night. The Bears have now lost 4 straight games. I ran through a whole bunch of numbers that your old friend Hembo gave me this morning about how good their defense has been. Our analytics at ESPN actually have them the number one defense in defensive efficiency since the coach has been in place, since Matt Nagy has been in place. But the offense is so ridiculously bad. Take me through your experience. Were you ever on a team where it was that kind of one-sided? What is that dynamic like in a locker room when one side of the ball is that good and the other is that bad?
I've never been there before, but I played against Golick all those years when the Philadelphia Eagles had the number one defense in all of football, and their offense was just pathetic. And I think it gets to the point where you're so frustrated and you start to actually make mistakes along the way on the defensive side of the ball occasionally, because you're like, hey, even if we pitch a shutout, we're still going to end a 0-0 tie because our offense is that pathetic. So, those are the things that you start to think, you start to gamble, you start to make mistakes even on the defensive side of the ball while you're dominating. So I know that it can be exceptionally frustrating. And defensively, they are just so exceptionally good. And I get that Mitchell Trubisky hasn't worked out. I understand, that aspect of what's gone on in Chicago. But to think that Nick Foles was going to create that magic that he created back in Philadelphia during that playoff run and during the Super Bowl, I just think that this is who he's been consistently throughout the time that he has been a starter, whether it was in Philly early or whether it was with the Rams or whether it was, here with Chicago. It's kind of where they are right now at the quarterback position. But I think they have a myriad of different problems. I think, receiving core, I think that they're good, but they're not exceptional. I don't think they are super dynamic there. And, their running game just hasn't been what it needs to be to kind of prop up a journeyman type of quarterback.
Listen, I mean, the numbers are so bad, Stink. I'll give you these. The last 4 games, hold on, let me get this because you made me think of it when you were saying that. The last 4 games in this 4-game losing streak, their offense, they have 20 punts, 7 turnovers, and 4 offensive touchdowns. That's what they've done in their last 4 games. So no one can win doing that, no matter how good your defense is. Okay, you've got a really interesting game this weekend on Fox. You've got the Browns and the Eagles. And the Eagles are a team that we've talked so much about on our show because there were very high expectations, and to this point, it just hasn't worked out. And were they in any other division, I think the noise might be a whole lot louder. I'm sure you've started to look at the film now on them. What are you seeing on the tape from the quarterback and everywhere else as far as what the Eagles aren't doing and what they need to do to become the team that it feels like they should be?
I think there's a couple things on tape. They have lost their ability to have a deep threat, and so I think there's no threat. There's no threat to the defense in that anybody's going to run by us. So they're getting a lot of really tight coverage, and there's a couple of different things that they've really struggled with. Carson Wentz's propensity to hold on to the football and for things to come open. That's been an issue. He has just kind of waited. They haven't had early answers in their offense. So there's not a lot of short, quick routes where they're early throws, or when they have one of those early throws, Carson is waiting for something else deeper to come open. Like I said, there's nobody that really threatens over the top. There's no fear of getting beat over the top. So you're seeing much tighter coverage on those intermediate routes because they are not afraid of getting beat over the top. And then ultimately, up front, their offensive line has broken down, especially in games. When I watch them on film, when they run tackle games or tackle lane games, they have done a really poor job of picking those things up. So guys are getting pressure early. They're getting pressure late. There's constantly somebody in Carson Wentz's face. So all those three things coupled together are really hurting this football team. So, it's the lack of a deep threat. It's the lack of Carson getting off or taking a profit when it's there. The old saying that you never go broke taking a profit. There's a lot of, when they do have an early throw, when they do have a back in the flat, he doesn't want to take it. He wants to push the ball. And that's been hurting this offense, getting them behind the chains and not letting them stay on schedule.
They go to Cleveland this weekend. Again, Mark Schlereth will be on the call. That's in the 1 o'clock window on Fox this weekend. And with the Giants beating them this past week, and the Giants, they're not a great team, but they look a little bit on the come. Yeah. If you right now had to pick a team in that division, who would you pick? Who is the best team in what they sometimes call now the NFC least? Which is the team that you would bet on if you had to bet something on which team winds up winning that division?
I picked the Giants after I called a game of the Giants 5 weeks ago to win this division. They're a physical
Which
team.
Game was that? I'm trying to remember. Which game did you have?
I had Giants at Washington. I also had Giants early in the season against the Rams. And
right. So
I just looked at them, after that Rams game and said, this is a team, if it figures it out. I had a long conversation with their offensive coordinator, Jason Garrett. And we were just talking about offensive principles in the running game in general. And, my conversation with him was pick one thing. Find one thing that you can do it exceptionally well, and then build off of that one thing. Ancillary plays that come off that one thing, whatever that happens to be, whether it's a gap system, whether it's a power counter system, whether it's a zone system. Find something that you can hang your hat on. Build, have that one tenet, and then build your offense around that. They're a big physical football team. They have gotten better up front. They have done a much better job of running the ball, controlling the tempo of the game, using Daniel Jones' skill set as a runner to create some explosive plays in that realm. Like I said it 5 weeks ago. I think that Giants team is the best team in the division that I've watched on tape, and I think eventually they'll win this. And I'm telling you, they have a lot of respect for Joe Judge. They have a lot of respect for what he has done, the way he coaches, the way he doesn't sell guys down the river. We're all in this kind of together perspective, and they're starting to play some really good football. Should have beaten Tampa a couple of weeks ago. Certainly, have 2 wins against Washington, but what they did last week was pretty impressive.
Now, I'm with you. As crazy as it sounds, about a team 3-7, I agree. They're the best team in that division, and I think they will win it. Again, Mark Schlereth will have the Eagles and the Browns in the 1 o'clock Eastern window on Fox this weekend. It is a pleasure to see you. Let's do this again soon. Thank you, Stink. Best to everybody.
Anytime, Greeny. Best to your family, man. Good to see you. I can't believe your kids are so grown up, by the way. I just remember them being little, and I see some of the videos. I'm like, we're not getting, I don't know how we're not aging, and they are. It just is unbelievable.
I'm with you. Funny, quick story. I have Zach Lowe waiting, but a quick story I'll tell. When Mark Schlereth's daughter Avery and my daughter Nikki, we were at ESPN The Weekend, whatever year this was, a million years ago. My daughter thought your daughter was Hannah Montana. Do you remember that? We walked in, we were backstage, and she said, "Dad, I think that was Mark Schlereth's daughter Avery." And so we go back a very, very long way. I love you, big fella. I'll talk to you later.
Love you too, buddy. Bye-bye.
Take care. That's Mark Schlereth with me again, doing so great on Fox Now. I love hearing him do games. That's really what he wanted to do, and he does. He's extremely good on the games. I like linemen doing games, to be honest with you, because they see things that we don't. Like, you don't need to tell me that was a great throw. I've seen enough football to know what was a great move. But what I can't tell you are some of the complexities of blocking schemes and things like that. So I like offensive linemen doing these games because they focus on that. And if you know Stink, as I do, no one understands line play as well as he does, so it's great. Okay, Greeny with you here on ESPN Radio, and Zach Lowe is ready to go. I want to tell you, Church's new chicken sandwich is finally here with almost 70 years in the kitchen. You can bet we put the work into it to make it worth it. It's everything you love about Church's between two buns. Get it today, just $3.99. Thanks for waiting. Church's bringing that down-home flavor. It's an extremely busy week in the NBA, and the host of the Low Post podcast and as good a basketball guy as we know is Zach Lowe, who joins me on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Hello, Zach Lowe.
How you doing, Greeny?
I'm doing great. It is a pleasure to talk to you, and it's a pleasure to have all this basketball wheeling and dealing in the middle of November. So let's start with the really big name in the middle of all of this. Where do we stand right now as far as James Harden is concerned, and what should we be expecting?
I think we stand at something of a stalemate. James Harden has reportedly made his wishes clear. He wants to be in Brooklyn. He doesn't want to be in Houston anymore, according to Woj, and also from what I've heard. And the Rockets so far are expressing pretty much no interest in really having any serious talks with Brooklyn or anybody else about James Harden. And, you know, eventually this has the potential to linger and linger and linger, and one side's going to cave or one side's not going to cave, or they're just going to sort of hold their noses and play together for a little while longer. But to me, the writing is on the wall, and once the writing starts to be written up on that wall, it's hard to erase it, and the end game seems like he's going to be elsewhere. But when, we don't know.
All right, tell me how the Brooklyn thing works. Is this a Harden KD thing? Is this a Harden KD and Kyrie thing? Like, how? Give me the math on Harden to Brooklyn, why they want it, and how they make it work.
Well, a number of executives have told me what the Nets should do is, instead of mortgaging their future, flip Kyrie for Harden. But to me, that seems a little early and a little unrealistic, given that Kyrie and KD literally just got there as a package deal. They're very good friends. So maybe that's the off-ramp later, right? Maybe if you trade the farm, which is Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, Spencer Dinwiddie, every pick and every swap that you're allowed to do, maybe if that ends up being the trade and it's not going well and Kyrie doesn't like being a third option and whatever, maybe that's your off-ramp to then moving Kyrie somewhere else and recouping some of that draft equity you sent out for Harden. But I think, look, these two teams have not had any substantive talks. Let's be clear about that. But I think if and when they do, it's more likely the offers are of that, just these good young players and every pick we've got, than Kyrie.
Zach Lowe with me on ESPN Radio. So let's say that they have some way at some point this season, they have Kevin Durant, they have James Harden, they have Kyrie Irving, and they've basically mortgaged everything else around them. So they just sort of fill it in with whatever they can. Does that team win the Eastern Conference?
I think they walk into the season as the favorites in the Eastern Conference, but it's close between them and Milwaukee after what the Bucks did last night, and Boston and Miami certainly still have to be right there, and Toronto too. But I think they walk in as the co-favorites, and I do look. They'll have Joe Harris back more than likely. He's a free agent. Taurean Prince would probably stay. They just made a nice little trade for a role player, Bruce Brown, yesterday. They'll have a decent, DJ is still there. They'll have a decent 8-9 man rotation around those big three guys if this actually happens. Good enough that I think, the star power, that's unmatched, at least on offense. Yeah, it's a combination I'd love to watch, because it would be like a fascinating chemistry experiment. You put three, what are they called in chemistry? You put three items together. What's the word I'm looking for? You mix three particles or whatever they are. I was bad
I was bad in chemistry then, and I remain bad in chemistry. You mix three things, and then you wonder, are they going to blow up, or are they going to create, like, something magnificent? What would be your guess? Could those three guys play together?
First of all, I opted out of honors chemistry in high school. So I just, covalent bonds, whatever you want to talk about, I'm out for that discussion.
Right.
Look, I'm more, the jokes are going to fly, right? Well, they're going to play with two basketballs. How are they going to keep everyone happy? Mm-hmm. I actually am a little bit more optimistic about the fit, at least on the surface, because KD, as great as he is, he's one of the greatest players of all time. He's always been willing to sort of alternate between my post-ups, my ISOs, and then I kind of become like Paul George, like running off pin downs, playing off the ball. He's fine with that. The challenge, I think, is going to be, can Kyrie accept that third option role? Because James Harden walks in, he's the lead ball handler. And the other challenge is, does James Harden remember how to play like normal basketball? I get to dribble 50 times and take a step back three. You don't get to do that with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on your team. I'm actually optimistic he does remember how he used to play before the last few years. I think the fit could really work well on offense, but Kyrie in particular would have to sacrifice.
It's going to be very interesting to watch. Zach Lowe, you'll be in the middle of all of it. Again, the draft is tomorrow. Tons of coverage, and let's do this again soon. Zach Lowe, thank you, my man. I'll see you soon.
Always a pleasure, Greeny. Be well.
Zach Lowe, again, the podcast is called The Lowe Post. The NBA is having a fascinating week. They do great off seasons. The NBA, I've joked around many times. The best season for the NBA is the postseason. The next best season is the off season. And it is fun to watch. And let's see where they wind up. If Harden winds up in Brooklyn, that would certainly be very interesting. But, Bubba, one way or another, the NBA is making moves.
Making Moves is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Build your winning team today. Go to linkedin.com/sports.
All right, so many different things we still have working here. Coming up, a Hall of Famer just became a free agent. Where is he going? We will talk about that. There's also something I just wanted to know. We will get to that, and I have a few stats that you're going to want to have with you for the rest of this day. All those are on the way with Greeny on ESPN Radio after this word from Mercedes-Benz Vans. You ever wonder just how far an extra mile really goes? Drive a Mercedes-Benz van, you can find out. Start with a network of over 250 authorized dealerships, backed by a sales force ready to help you with everything from customization and service to financing options. They offer a variety of vans like the durable Mercedes-Benz Sprinter or the versatile Mercedes-Benz Metris, each of them tailored to match your work or play lifestyle. With options like blind spot assist and active lane keeping assist, plus MBUX voice command tech that during those hours. Well, so I got some news today. Theo Epstein, again, resigning as the president of baseball operations for the Cubs. I was reading Jeff Passan's Twitter feed. It sounds like Theo is going to go back into this at some point, but plans to take a year off. Let's try and figure out what might be next for him as we bring Jeff Passan into the conversation on the Shell Penzo Performance Line. Hello, Passan.
Hello, Greeny. How are you?
Oh, excellent. And so, look, Theo, to me, is a lock Hall of Famer. I actually saw someone describe him as a possible Hall of Famer. Like, to me, if you were to figure out the two most significant championships that have been won in the sport in the last, I don't even know how long, 50 years, it would be the one he engineered in 2004 in Boston and the one he engineered in 2016 in Chicago. And so, to me, I think he's a slammed. I don't know anything about this stuff, and you do. I feel like if he's not a Hall of Famer, who the heck is?
There aren't a lot of executives in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, so that's working against him. But yeah, I mean, what he did in Boston, and not just winning in 2004 and winning in 2007, but sort of setting the stage and the culture for 13 and 18, 4 championships in a 15-year run there. That started because of Theo Epstein and what he was able to build there. And then going to Chicago and doing the impossible. And it's interesting, Greeny. He sent a letter earlier today to friends and colleagues talking about, a myriad of things, why he made this decision, what his future looks like. And I've had the chance through the years to read Theo Epstein's writing. He's an incredible writer. And I think I got the most passion from him in that letter, talking about what they had built in Chicago, how he had come in wanting to make this culture that just had not been around for all the heartbreak, all the awful baseball that Chicago saw through the years, one thing that was missing was just a consistent winning culture there. And it's like he said in the letter, we did that, and we did that quickly. And while I think the legacy of Theo Epstein in Chicago will be tinged with a little bit of disappointment that they had only one championship, they still have one more championship than they had in the previous 100 years. And that is something that is incredible and something that absolutely does deserve enshrinement in the Hall of Fame.
I completely agree. So now that we agree on that, let's get to the business at hand. I read the same letter you did. And, oh, by the way, he should be a great writer. You know, his uncle wrote the screenplay to Casablanca. So he won an Oscar for that. So writing runs in the family. But hey, hashtag Bubba, jump on here and tell Jeff Passan where you think Theo Epstein's next stop should be. Hashtag Bubba, have we lost you? Maybe we've lost hashtag Bubba. Well, I'll do it then. Hashtag Bubba is a crazy fan of the New York Mets, who now have the richest owner in Major League Baseball. Does that seem like a reasonable place for Theo to consider going next? And if not, then where should we be looking?
Here's the problem with that, Greeny. He's taken a year off. I just, it's not just that he said it in the letter. I think he needs a break. And we saw this in Boston too. Like, he was overwhelmed there by that job. And, his eldest son is 13 now. He's got 2 boys. And, he wants to spend a little bit of time with his family. He wants to, Theo Epstein is a very politically motivated person. And he has causes that are near and dear to his heart. And he wants to devote some time to those too. And I don't know, maybe Steve Cohen comes in with the Godfather offer of all Godfather offers. And Theo Epstein looks at this and says, I slayed the dragon in Boston. I slayed the dragon in Chicago. Now I'm going to go to New York, where Mets fans have been waiting 35 years, and slay the dragon with them too. And, like he said in that letter, Greeny, I'm going to have a third act at some point. Mm-hmm. I just don't know if that point is right now, because I think he is so devoted and committed at this point to the idea of taking time away and of the way that it's almost like when you've been doing this job that he's done for the last 9 years, like a video game character whose meter is down at like 5%. And I feel like he can fill that 95% with a year away from baseball. And maybe I'm being naive to think that, Steve Cohen's money, his power, whatever he offers to Theo Epstein would not be enough. I've just gotten the impression that this next year away from baseball means something to him and that he's actually going to take it. And if you're the Mets, it's a great question. Do you wait a year? Do you, if you're Sandy Alderson, hire a general manager but not hire a president of baseball operations in hopes that a year from now you can get him? Or would that be a very New York Knicks type move? Hey, let's clear cap space for a bunch of people who don't want to come here.
Look at you mixing your sports and mixing your metaphors and doing it awfully well, as only you can.
Greeny, I'm just trying to get back on to Get Up. Like the baseball offseason, you guys don't care anymore. So you can bring me in. I can break down film with Orlovsky. I can jump in there with Woj and talk about bird rights. Whatever you need, buddy. I'm here for you.
You're going to wear that Mahomes costume again. I might get you in there if they lose on Sunday night. Hey, thank you, Jeff. I'll see you soon.
All right, Greeny. Take care, pal.
It's Jeff Passan with me here on ESPN Radio. Let me tell you something about why I believe Theo Epstein belongs in the Hall of Fame. We'll make this the proof is in the pencil. Okay, so the proof is in the accomplishments. The proof is in the history. I remember Chris Carter said to me many, many years ago that the test of a Hall of Famer is, can you write the history of the sport without him? You're going to tell me you're going to write the history of baseball right now without Theo Epstein? Theo Epstein built the Red Sox, who snapped at that time what was, I think, the most, I think there was even more buzz at that time around the Red Sox streak because of the Babe Ruth connection, because of how close they came on multiple different occasions, including 86 and 03 and all these other things, 75. They had come so close so many times that snapping the Red Sox streak was, at the time, it felt as big a thing as could possibly happen. And then he went and tried to climb the only mountain that could possibly have been even taller, because he went to Chicago, where the Cubs streak was even markedly longer. At that point, it was 108 years by the time they got there. So he was there, 3-4 years before? So it was well over 100 years by the time he got there. You cannot write the story of the history of the game of baseball without Theo Epstein. And to me, that is proof that he absolutely belongs in the Hall of Fame. The proof is in the Pennzoil. Pennzoil synthetic motor oils are made from natural gas, giving you unbeatable engine protection. The proof is in the Pennzoil, based on Sequence 4A wear test using SAE 5W30. I'll tell you another thing about just how incredibly smart of a guy Theo Epstein is. I had the chance to spend a little time with him in his box. Just through a friend of a friend, I happened to be in his box during a run-of-the-mill afternoon Cubs game. This is before they won it. This was probably 2014 or 15. They weren't that good yet, so maybe this is all the way back to 14. And we were just talking about the game. And he said to me, my biggest concern for the game right now is that we're going to get boring, because the move that every team is making right now is we all can bring 3 guys out of our bullpen who can throw 100 miles an hour. And if eventually that's what baseball becomes, it's going to get boring, because there'll just be no more offense. And obviously what has happened is that has been countered by all these home runs. But what I'm trying to say is that Theo saw this trend in baseball. It's because Theo is the trends in baseball. It is because the trends are created by a small group of people, and he's one of them. I like and admire Theo as much as I do practically anybody in sports. So he's going to do awfully well. If he wants to take a year off, he will. If he wants another job, he'll get one as soon as he wants it. And if he wants any number of a variety of opportunities that will come his way outside of baseball, I think that bears watching as well. He's a fascinating person, and it'll be interesting to see. All right, I'm going to do something I never do here, and that is I'm going to ask you a little trivia question. I'm going to use trivia as my Greeny tease, because I got a good one here from Hembo. If indeed James Harden winds up on a team with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, it would be one of very few times in NBA history that one team would have 3 of the